Okay. Doing all right today? Very good. I always have to ask officially. I don't know how to start class any other way. Right? Were there any questions I could answer for you? Oh, there he is. Any questions I could answer before we get started? No? All right. Well, we were talking about views when we left off last week. Where we were, what we had been working on most recently, was we'd created a series of product pages. We had basically created a product layout. Right? The product layout was sort of the framework of our page. We've got the HTML tags, the head section, the body section, all of the general content. Right? Into our layout here, we have three different places where we can yield data. Up in the title tags, we can yield in a value to put in there. And then down in the body, we have just a general yield where the general content of the page is going to go. And then we have a specific yield to yield in a backlink and a yield to yield in a forward link. Right? To go along with that layout then, we'd created 4 different product templates, one for coffee cup, one for dirt, one for happiness, one for laptop, the 4 things that we're going to sell. Right? In each one of those 4 different templates, what we had was a content for method call, where we specifically tell the layout which content to fill in for those specific yields. So we say, here's the content for the title. So whenever the coffee cup page comes up, that content is what will be injected into the position where we've said the yield for the title. We have the same basic thing then for our forward and back links so that we can set up links that go back and forth between all our various products. Coffee cup has a forward link that goes to dirt. Dirt has a forward link that goes to happiness and a back link that goes back to coffee cup, for example. Right? And what we end up with from all that is basically these 4 simple little pages with our links that let us go back and forth between our different products. Does that all sound familiar? Remember that? Okay. When we left off last week, we had started talking a little bit about helpers. Right? Helpers in this case basically being some methods that are built into Rails that can make doing very common sort of little jobs in the views easier. I think the helpers that we've talked about so far, at least a little bit, was we talked about the style sheet link tag helper, which basically goes through quite an extensive process nowadays in order to get all of the different style sheets that we've made available to our application called from, to call all those style sheets from the individual pages. That behavior then included not only writing the actual link tags that will link those style sheets to the different pages in our application, but also doing things like changing its behavior when we go into production mode. So instead of having multiple style sheets, the style sheets are all concatenated together and then served as just one single file. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about the JavaScript include tag helper as well, which does essentially the same thing but for JavaScript files. And then in the head section there was also that helper method called CSRF meta tags, which puts some sort of, I guess you could say, security related meta tags up into the head section to help Rails keep track of what are valid calls, what are invalid calls, things of that nature. Right? So what I wanted to start with today was some other helpers that are not necessarily thrown into our templates for us automatically, kind of the way that these seem to be, but instead some helpers that are there basically for us to use whenever it happens to be convenient for us. Right? For starters, what I'd like to do is on each one of my different products, I want to go in and I want to put in a picture of that product. Right? So I guess I need to jump out to Google Images and look up some pictures. So let me find some images of a coffee cup first of all. That looks like a pretty nice coffee cup picture right there. I don't need anything too amazing, so I'm just going to take sort of the thumbnail they have of it here. I'm going to download it. Ingress. Am I getting the right thing? Save image as. Let me try that. Alright. Where I'm going to actually put that image is under the app folder in our project. There's an assets folder. That's where our JavaScript and style sheets were that we looked at last week. You notice that there's also a images folder there. That's basically where all the images in our products are meant to go, or all the images in our project are meant to go. So into that images folder, I'm going to call this file coffee cup. I'll save it right there. Alright, I'm also going to need an image of some dirt. There we go. There's some dirt. Let me save that image into the images folder as dirt. I need an image of happiness. I hope we don't get any porn. Okay, let's see, happiness. There, that's a good product image of happiness right there. Let me grab that one. And then finally of a laptop. I have moral objections to a lot of those laptops. There we go, there's a laptop right there. Let me save this one. Laptop. Okay, so at that point I should have all 4 of my product images. Let me go take a look at them. Under App, under Assets, under Images, there's the default Rails image in there, and now I've got these 4 others as well. What kinds of images are these? That one's a JPEG, 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 and JPEG. Alright, I'm going to need to know the extension for the file name, so wanted to make sure I knew what types of images those actually were. Okay, so now onto my coffee cup page. If I want to put in an image of a coffee cup, if we wanted to do this the old-fashioned way, I could use a good old-fashioned HTML image tag, right? Tell it to put in coffeecup.jpg. You should always put in an alt text. Something like that. If I bot back over to my browser, where'd my browser go? Did I close it? No, either I closed it or it crashed. That was smart of me. Let me pull it back up. There we go. Alright, when I get back to my coffee cup page, that's what I get. Broken image tag. Right? The image tag is there. It wants to put in the image, but it's not able to find the image. Okay? What do you suppose the problem might be? Well, probably it just can't find the image, right? If I go back to the browser and I take a look at the developer's console, the actual coffee cup JPEG image there, sure enough, shows up as nothing. If I take a look at the errors, it tells me it failed to load the file, coffeecup.jpg. So it's not able to find it. Probably the problem is the path, right? I'm not telling it to look in the right place. Remember, my image is not in the same place as my template file is, so I probably need to tell it what directory to look in. So what do I say? /assets/images/coffee cup? If I give that a try, still doesn't work. No better. Right? Essentially, I believe that the correct path is images/coffee cup. Oh, maybe I believe wrong. Maybe it's assets, coffee cup. Maybe the fact of the matter is I have no idea how to get to that image. That might be what it comes down to. Right? Part of the reason I have no idea how to get to it is because generally I never have to actually do this by hand. Right? The whole purpose in this, in digging into these images, was to point out the fact that Rails views give us a method that we can use anytime we want to insert an image called image tag. If I call the image tag method, right, all I have to do is tell it the name of the image. So I can put in coffeecup.jpg. And look at that, that works. Okay. The image tag helper, this image tag method that we can call, is convenient in a number of different ways. Right? Certainly, one of the nice things about it is it's rather brief. Right? Typing out that image tag method call is usually shorter than actually typing out an HTML image tag by hand. Another one of the nice things about that image tag helper is that it knows where images are. Right? It knows that your images should be over there in that images folder. So instead of you having to figure out or know what the path is to get to that particular folder, it fills that in for you automatically. So any image that's in that images folder or in a subfolder below it can be found with the image tag method very, very easily. If it's directly in that images folder, you just put the name of the file. If it was in a subfolder, then I would just need to put a path starting from the images folder, essentially. Okay. Excuse me. What the actual image tag method ends up giving us, if we take a look. There it is right. Oh, here it is right here. Right? I know the code's kind of small up there on the screen, okay? But essentially what that image tag method did for us was it wrote an image tag. Okay? It put in the proper path in order to get to the images folder, which it turns out is /assets/filename. Okay? It also takes the actual name of the image, in this case coffee_cup.jpg. It trims off the file name extension .jpg, and it uses what's left as the alt text automatically. So without me having to tell it to, it set the alt text to coffee_cup, and it even capitalized the first letter. Nice that it did that. Okay. If you wanted to be able to supply your own alt text, you could do that just by including it as an argument. Right? I could say steamy coffee cup for my alt text, for example. And if I look at it in the browser, it's now using my alt text that I put in instead of the automatically generated alt text. No, nothing to it. Right. So the image tag method, very convenient. If I wanted to go ahead and drop in images of my other products over on the dirt page, right, inside ERB output tags, I'll just call the image tag method again. This time I'll tell it the image's name is dirt.jpg. I could put in my own alt if I wanted to, but seeing the behavior that it had before of auto-generating the alt text, I know it's going to put in dirt with a capital D, which is about what I would do as well. So I don't feel the need to supply any special alt text with that one. Over on the happiness page, I'll call the image tag helper, tell it to put in happiness.jpg. Again, I know the alt text is automatically going to get set to happiness with a capital H, which sounds good to me. And then finally on the laptop page, I'll do image tag, laptop.jpg, and that ought to be it. If I bounce back over to my browser, scroll through my different images, or my different products, I guess I should say, looks like they are all there.
What's the thing for the alt text again?
It's just a, what you call it? Where is it? Hash style key and value. So in this case, alt colon, and then the value you want to set for it. Besides the image tag helper, which obviously is there to help us put in images, Rails also has lots of different helpers that have to do with formatting text. I don't really have an applicable place to show you all of these in here, but for the most part, they're all pretty simple. Okay. There's, for example, a helper called time ago in words. Okay. Basically, the time ago in words helper, if you give it a time in the past, okay, it'll tell you how far back that was, sort of in English-like language. So if I gave it say, February 26th, instead of coming back and saying that was exactly 6 point whatever days ago, it would come back and say, it's about a week ago. Or if I gave it March 3rd, 2012, right? Instead of saying it was so many days ago, it would come back and say, about a year. Right? So the time ago in words helper is a great way to take sort of very precise, specific changes from one date to another and to turn it into a more natural English-like language. It's a pretty neat little helper. Right? There's also a helper then called number to currency. Right? The number to currency helper basically lets you give it a number and it displays it as currency. That's certainly one we actually could put on our product page if we wanted to. Right? If I wanted to say in here how much my cups of coffee cost, I could do something like, say, number to currency, and I could give it some number. Let's say our coffee costs $2.50 essentially. Right? When I look at that on the actual rendered page down there at the bottom, it comes up as $2.50, proper number of decimal places, a $sign. Right? Of course, what I could have done here, given that that value is just hard-coded, is I could have just in the HTML text written $2.50, and that would have been fine. But the overall idea is that this value would probably be coming out of a database or would be calculated in one way or another. So having this helper available just gives us an easy way to take something that's essentially numeric and to then display it as if it were currency without any trouble. Sort of similar to that, Rails also has a method called number to human size. Right? What it actually does is it takes big numbers and it converts it into things like kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes. So if I gave it 1024, right, the number to human size method would come back with 1K, 1 kilobyte, 1 KB. Occasionally handy. There are also then helpers that'll turn numbers into percentages for you. Right? There's a helper that'll turn a number into a phone number, formatted as a phone number. There's a helper that will automatically put in delimiters in numbers. Right? Like maybe here I'll say the price is that. I'll make another paragraph and I'll say number sold. And I'm going to say number with delimiter. And let's say we've sold that many. When I pull that up in the browser, you can see it nicely put the delimiters, the commas in for me to make it all look a little bit nicer, a little more readable. That's a big number. Is that trillions? Or gazillions. I think it's gazillions, which is my favorite make-believe type of number. Okay, so handful of different formatting helpers. Little helpers built into Rails that just make it easier for us to deal with numbers, deal with images for our convenience. Rails also has some text helpers built in. Basically little methods that make it easier for us to do different things with text. Not necessarily format, but sometimes format. But sort of different little operations that we might want to perform on text. Let's see, again on my coffee cup page. Let's say I have some text up here dealing with coffee cups. I'll just put in some lorem ipsum, just some make-believe text in there. So I just have this sort of paragraph of text. And let's say that at certain points in this text, I mention coffee. So I'm just putting coffee in here. Okay. So at some point in the text on my product page, I mention coffee. Okay. Maybe every time coffee is mentioned, what I want to do is I want to have that word coffee highlighted or bolded or made to stand out in some particular way. Okay. Well, Rails actually has a method called highlight. What we can do with the highlight method is we can pass it the text. Oh, this needs to be inside ERB tags. So let me put a set of ERB tags around the entire thing. Then I'll call highlight. I'll pass it that description as a string. And then as a second argument, I'm going to tell it the thing that I want it to highlight. Right? So inside the output ERB tags, I'm saying call the highlight method. First argument is a block of text. Second argument is the part of that text that I want to receive a highlight. If I come back and I look at my text now, you can see the text is all showing up as bold. Right? What's actually happening in there, there we go, is that the highlight method automatically searched through, found all occurrences of the word that I asked to have highlighted, and it put all those words inside a set of strong tags with a class of highlight. Right? So they automatically became bold. And since the class is there, it'd be a simple thing for me to then go in and add or change the display features of those bits of highlighted text if I happen to want to. Easy enough? Another handy little method that I use quite often is for pluralizing. There's a pluralize method that Rails provides. With the pluralize method, what you do is you tell it what number of something you're working with. So I could say, for example, 4, and then I could tell it the word that I wanted to have pluralized. So I could say for product. What Rails will do from that is it'll produce a little string as output that includes both the number and the word word will be pluralized correctly based on the number. So here it comes back with 4 products. Whereas if the number that it had been given was 1 product is what we end up getting. Okay. Again, kind of like with the number to currency thing. Seems kind of silly to do this when I'm just hard coding the values, but the idea would be that we've pulled some products out of our database. We don't know how many there are. Maybe there's 0, maybe there's 1, maybe there's a gazillion of them. Right? Well, if we just take however many products there are as a number, the size of the array essentially, plus the word product, then the pluralize method can make sure that's always shown correctly for us. It's always fun to kind of mess with it too. Right? Like, what if I give it the word goose? 4 goose? 4 gooses. Nah, it doesn't get that one right, does it? Should have been geese. What about mice? 4 mice. Oh, that should have been mouse. Ah, look at that. It did do that one right. If I say 4 mouse, it comes back with 4 mice. If I tell it 1 mouse, 1 mouse. 0 mice. Moose. M-O-O-S-E. Mooses. Should have just always been moose, huh? If you ever want to fiddle with this a little bit, it's actually a very simple little thing. Out under the config directory in your project, there's a subfolder called Initializers. And under the Initializers folder, there's a file in there called Inflections. What you can do in here, they've got some examples right through here, is you can teach it different inflections. So if we wanted to tell it that moose can't be pluralized, there's an uncountable category here where we could add moose to it so it would know not to ever pluralize moose. Other than that, we could go in and put in simple substitutions. Different things. It's kind of a neat little thing. Alright, I'm going to change that back to product. 4 products. Except that was supposed to be coffee, wasn't it? We'll say 1 coffee. There. Okay, pluralize. Okay. Another handy little text helper that Rails has, again, is something that you might use if you just happen to have a big block of text. So here I've put in another, another paragraph of text. There it is. Okay. Perhaps this is a description of the product that's stored in the database, for example. There might be certain situations where I want the entire description to be shown, but there might be other times when I only want sort of a little blurb from the description to be available. Okay. In a situation where I only want a little blurb to be available, what I could do is there's a method called truncate. If I call truncate and I pass a string to it, it automatically truncates that string, basically starting at the beginning through a certain number of characters, finishing it off with an ellipses. There are some different arguments that you can pass to truncate, where you can control how many characters it actually truncates down to. You can do things like change the ellipses character if you wanted it to end with something else. All of it's covered in documentation, so all things that you can look up relatively easily. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? All right. Next helper is one that we're going to use a lot, and that is a helper called linkto. Just like the image tag helper makes it easier for us to insert image tags, the linkto helper makes it easier for us to write hyperlinks, which is, of course, something we do pretty often. Right? If I wanted to use the linkto helper, for example, to replace this hyperlink that I wrote right here, what I could do is call linkto, and I need to pass it essentially 2 arguments. Okay? The first one is the link text, essentially what I wanted to show to the user. The second argument is where I'm actually linking to. So in this case, products, dirt. I'll comment out the handwritten HTML version of my hyperlink. I'll just use linkto to create that hyperlink for me instead. And if I take a look down at the bottom, looks like I mistyped. I forgot the semicolon, didn't I? Oh, I think I know what's happening. Anyway, that's what I get down there for my dirt link. Okay? Dirt, and then it actually shows me my little HTML escape character. Not fantastic. Okay? The hyperlink itself works. When I click it, it does take me over to the dirt page. Okay? It just doesn't look right. If I actually inspect what was generated there, it looks pretty okay. Ampersand RARR. Did I do anything different than what I had done before? Got it. Semicolon's there. Okay. I think it's being escaped somehow. On that string that I put together, the dirt with the escape sequence in it, I'm going to call a method called HTML safe. Let's see if that has any effect. Absolutely. That fixed it. Rails tries to help us out security-wise by automatically doing things like escape sequences and HTML characters that it finds inside strings. If you have a string and you have a bit of HTML in it that you don't want Rails to mess with, you don't want it to nullify it in any way, calling this HTML safe method on it usually does the trick. Essentially, we're just telling Rails that this string has already been determined to be safe, so you do not need to go through any process in order to make it safe. So the link2 helper, right, writes hyperlinks for us. We tell it what it is that we want to link to, the link text, and then the actual URL in this case. Right. Overall, this looks like a pretty bad deal, because look how many characters it took to write the link2 method versus how many it took to just write it by hand in HTML. Yeah, seems like a bad deal at the moment. But as our URLs become more complicated, when we start doing things especially like putting in URL parameters to carry values from one page to another, for example, at that point the link2 method will really become quite a bit more handy, because it will do a lot of the nasty busy work for us. Make it a lot easier to write more complex URLs than it would have been by hand, to write the anchor tags by hand. Let's see, let me write one more set of these. Over here, my backlink on the dirt page, let me say link to, I want to do a left arrow, and we're going to go back to coffee cup, and I'm going to mark that as safe, and where that's actually going to go to is products/coffee cup. For my forward link down here to happiness, I'll link to happiness with a right arrow, mark that as safe, and that one's going to go to products happiness.
So that we have double quote on that kind of singles.
Oh, yeah. In these cases, doubles or singles either way would work fine. I'm just kind of mixing them randomly, aren't I? I put singles around one and then double around everything else. It's just whatever my finger hits first, it seems like most of the time. See, if I go over to my dirt page, there's my link back to coffee cup, which seems to work. My link forward to, forward to happiness, which seems to work. There we go, the link2 helper. Okay. I might also mention that there is also a mail-to helper, mail_to, does basically the exact same thing but for email addresses. So first argument, you would tell it the name of the person or the text that you want to be shown. Second argument, you would give it an email address, and it would write a mail-to link instead of a regular old hyperlink.
Would you put that open in the window for mail?
It would open up a new message on whatever your local default mail client is. Yeah. Not the best way in the world to send email, but it is there, just in case. Okay, so that's just sort of a handful of some of the different sort of text and view related helpers that Rails has available for us. There's about a gazillion more. I think that's the third time I've managed to work gazillion into the class today. There's about a gazillion more, that's 4 times now, that we haven't actually talked about, but there are a lot of those different ones around, so don't be surprised if you see them. Spend a little time digging through some of the Rails documentation. You'll run into lots of neat little helpers. Right? A lot of times they can save you a pretty decent amount of work so that you don't have to write nearly as much HTML by hand. HTML is certainly not a very complicated thing to understand, to use, but it is very wordy. It does take a lot of typing a lot of times with HTML to get done what you need to get done. And often Rails has helpers that can write or modify the HTML for you and make the job of putting together your views a little bit easier. Right? Speaking of wordy HTML, one of the wordiest things in HTML, I think, are forms. Right? Writing any kind of decent form in HTML, you're going to do a bit of typing. There's the form tags themselves. There's the fields themselves. Regular text fields aren't too horrible, although they typically have to have at least 2 or 3 attributes in order to be at all useful. Every text field then also has to have a label tag that goes with it. Usually those need to be grouped together into some kind of container, a paragraph, or a div. Right? And then when you move away from text tags, when you start doing, or text fields, when you start doing checkboxes and radio buttons and select tags, they just get longer and longer and longer. Just about any HTML form you write that is non-trivial is going to take a considerable amount of typing. Right? So a lot of the helpers that you can use in Rails views tend to revolve very specifically around the creation of forms to try and make the job of actually creating forms with all the proper names and IDs and attributes, getting those all put together for you with a fairly minimal amount of work. Right? Now, that leaves us in a little bit of a weird position because most of the form helpers, the way that we would typically use them, actually tie directly into activerecord. Right? ActiveRecord that manages all of our data in our database, that manages our models. Right? Most of Rails' form helper methods talk to ActiveRecord and can do things like say what fields are there supposed to be, what data type is this field, what data type is that field. It can go back and forth with lots of different types of information so that it can do things to decide on names and such when it's actually putting the forms together. So the reason that leaves us in a bit of an awkward position is that we can't really play with these form helpers very effectively in views purely. We really need to have a model and a controller, at least one, set up so that the back end is kind of there for these form helper things to actually talk to. All right? So what I thought we would try is I put together an example Rails project, and I basically just yanked all the views out of it. Right? Out on my website, under our Rails class section, under class materials, I have an example out there called lightsabers views example. Right? I'm going to go ahead and download that project. I'm going to grab that folder, move it over to my desktop. I'm going to change directories over to it on my console, so I'm in that lightsabers project now. I need to do that over here too. Go ahead and open it up in my text editor. And generally, whenever you grab a new project like we just did, maybe something that somebody else worked on, maybe something that you did in the past but haven't worked on in a while, usually the very best thing to do first is run bundle. So once you get that thing downloaded, you've gone to your command line, you've changed directories to it, run bundle. That way, Rails can go out, or Bundler, I guess technically, can go out and make sure that we have all the proper gems installed for being able to actually run this project. Yeah, see, it's having to install a bunch of stuff. I believe when I created this thing, the current version of Rails was 3.1, and we've been working in 3.2. So it's probably going to have to reinstall most of our gems in order to get this to work. But that's all right. It's nice that it does that so sort of semi-automatically. Okay? While that thing's actually running, let's go take a little tour and see what we've got in the project. Okay? Usually when I come out and I'm looking at a new Rails project, one of the very first things I like to look at is the models. What kind of data are we going to be dealing with here? Okay? In the case of this little lightsabers example, under the models folder, there's a single model file there called lightsaber. I can see that sure enough, there's a lightsaber class. It validates that every lightsaber has a name. Right? The name has to be present and the name has to be unique. Validates for presence and uniqueness. I can also see that every lightsaber is going to have a color, and the color has to be included in the array. Green, blue, yellow, purple, or red. Those are the only colors we're allowed to have. Otherwise it won't validate. Okay, so lightsabers appear to be what we're going to be dealing with. I know every lightsaber has a name and a color. Let me go look at the migrations. Under the DB migrate folder, I see one migration there. So it looks like every lightsaber in the lightsabers table in the database will have a name, a description, a color, which are basically text, string and text. There's a Boolean value for dark side, so a true/false for whether it's a dark side lightsaber. And it looks like every lightsaber can have an image. That's cool. Right? I also see that there's already a development database out there. Development.sqlite3. So hopefully there's already some data in it. That would be groovy. Let's see. If I jump over to a new command line while bundle is still running on the other one, if I start up the console, oh, that didn't work. Probably don't have the gems I need yet. Yeah, not installed yet. So can't get to the console yet. We'll have to wait on that until bundler's done doing its work. So anyway, before we can get to the console, what else do we have out here? Under assets, under images, it looks like there's about 5 different lightsaber images available. Under JavaScript, under style sheets, looks like there's one JavaScript, one style sheet. Who knows if there's anything in it? Not terribly important at the moment. Under controllers, I see a lightsabers controller that looks like it's pretty much filled out. We don't really know much about the controller yet. We haven't played with it, but if you look at it, most of that stuff in there is just active record work. So that should be familiar. I can see that there should be an index page, a show page, a new page, an edit page. Right? The ability to create, the ability to update, the ability to destroy. So it looks like the controller supports all of that. And if I take a look under Views, Layouts, there's the application layout, which is modified a little bit. I see this page div that's been put in. That's not normal. And under the lightsabers views themselves, there is then nothing. Right? That's what we want to make. We want to create all the other views, including the forms, so that we can work with our lightsabers here. You with me? Right? So basically it's a complete little lightsabers project. Probably even already has lightsaber data in the database. Everything is done except we need views. That's the one part that's missing. The views we're going to need is we're going to need an index page, which will show us a list of all the lightsabers. We need a show page, which would show us details about one lightsaber. We need a new page, which would be the form that would be used to create a new lightsaber. An edit page for editing a lightsaber. Basically those 4 pages. Right? The create, the update, and the destroy are not actual pages. Those are other abilities that it has. How's Bundler doing? Yay, looks like it made it. Let me try the console again. Couldn't find awesome printer HIRB, but that's okay. We can live without that. If I say lightsaber, it seems to recognize it. Lightsaber.all. Yep, there's a handful of lightsabers in there. Excellent. All right. I think maybe I'll leave the console running. On another command line here, I'm going to go ahead and start up my server, Rails S. Okay. If I go back over to my browser and I go to localhost 3000/lightsabers, this is what I get. Template is missing. It is looking for lightsabers/index, and it is not able to find it, which makes sense. We already noticed that we don't have any views. So that would probably be a good place for us to start, yeah? So under the Views Lightsabers folder, I'm going to create a new page there. I'm going to call it index.html.erb. Index.html.erb. Here, I'll tell you what, I'll put it up here at the top of the page as a comment. Why isn't it letting me make my tags? There we go. This is index.html.erb. Alright. How about at the top of this page I put in an H1 and I say lightsabers. If I go back to my browser, hit refresh, ooh, some CSS in there, I guess, huh? It's all glowy and stuff. Don't worry, I wrote the CSS. It won't get any more impressive than that. Okay. What I'd like to do on this page, this index page, is I'd like to show a list of all of the lightsabers that are in the database. Okay. It's possible that I could do something like, say, at lightsabers equals lightsaber.all, just like we would do on the console if we wanted to grab a list of all of our lightsabers. Okay. But I don't need to do that because over in the controller, it has essentially done that already. Okay. It's a little fancified. It's looking for a color. If a color isn't there, it'll end up retrieving all the lightsabers. But that's the basic idea. Right? So considering that it's already done in the controller, see the controller under index is creating this instance variable called lightsabers. That would then mean here on the index page, the index template, I'll already have a variable called lightsabers with all the lightsabers in it. Okay. How could I be sure of that? Well, what if I said output at lightsabers.size? If I pull that up in the browser, it comes up and says 3. So it is actually finding lightsabers. There are 3 lightsabers for us to view. Lightsabers.size, I could actually use that to customize my title up here at the top, my H1. I could say pluralize, take the value of lightsabers.size and pluralize the word lightsaber. So it says 3 lightsabers. If I only had 1 lightsaber, it would just say 1 lightsaber. Do you have any questions? You all right? Okay. So we're putting together the view for an index page showing a list of lightsabers. The controller that was already written is providing us with an array of lightsabers called @lightsabers. Right? Since @lightsabers is an array, that means I could loop through it. I could say @lightsabers.each do lightsaber. Just do a little each iterator for the lightsabers array, like we've done in Ruby a million times. Inside the loop, what if I take the lightsaber that we're looking at and I say output its name? Didn't lightsabers have a name? That's what we get. Anakin, Luke, Mace, Windu. The last two names are one. Mace Windu is one person. So Anakin, Luke, and Mace Windu are the three people's lightsabers we have in the database, apparently. That's well and good. I think it might be nice, though, if we could display the data a little bit in a little bit more of a structured manner. What if we take all the data about the lightsabers and we display it as a table? How about that? Let me put in some table tags around that each loop. Let me start a row before the loop, and let me put in some headers. Every lightsaber is going to have a name, a description, color, whether it's in the dark side or not, oh, and an image. Okay. Then for the loop, what I could do, each time through the loop, I could create a new row in the table. First cell inside that row, I'll put the name. Second cell inside that row, I'll put the description. Third cell, I'll do the color. Fourth cell, dark side. And in the last cell, the image. If I jump over to the browser and hit refresh, that is what I now get. These views are a lot more fun when you have some data to work with. Right. What else could we do to this? How about the image? Instead of showing the name of an image, which is kind of a, yeah, okay, who cares? What if we show the image itself? We know that there are images out there under the assets directory. What if I wanted to actually show the image? Well, I've got the name of the image here stored as the image attribute of a lightsaber. I could use the image tag helper, right? Couldn't I just say image tag lightsaber image? I got the images. I think they're a bit big though. How about as a second argument here, I put in width, 100 pixels. Pretty much anything you put in after the actual image name is just interpreted to become HTML attributes. So there we go, that's a bit better. A little more manageable. Except for Mace down there. Mace doesn't have an image. No image for Mace's lightsaber. I'd rather it not have that broken image tag. So maybe what I should do is I should make the displaying of that image conditional. So around the code to call the image tag helper, let me see if I can move that up further for you. What if I said, let's do unless lightsaber.image is blank, show the image. Lightsaber is an active record object, right? .image gives us a string that's stored in that active record object. The blank question mark method is one you can call on any string, just tells you if the string is blank or not, true or false. So we're saying unless we get back false, use the image tag helper to write an image tag for us. There we go. And now only lightsabers where there is an image will it actually attempt to show an image. Okay. What else? How about that description? These descriptions aren't terribly long, but they could be, couldn't they? If somebody wrote 3 paragraphs about Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, I don't know that I'd actually want to show 3 paragraphs of text here in my little table, which is supposed to be sort of a summary of all the lightsabers that are available. So maybe what I want to do is I'm going to go to that description, I want to truncate it. I could just use the truncate method. Truncate lightsaber.description. And they get truncated. One of them wasn't quite long enough to need it. The other one, though, did get truncated. And now if somebody were to go in and take one of those descriptions and blow it into a Wikipedia article, I don't have to worry about it destroying the layout of my table. Seem okay so far? Do you have questions? First time we've messed with views that are actually supplied with active record data. Active records out there dealing with the database, like we spent about the first third of the semester talking about. And here we have a pre-written controller for us that whenever we go to a specific page is talking to active record, gathering up the proper data through active record, and then supplying it here to our views. Not even interesting. No, I'm just kidding. I think this is the coolest thing in the world. It's great. How easy this is. Right. My whole page. Hardly anything to it. But it could display 1,000,000 lightsabers for me if it needed to. Okay. Well, what's next then? What if we set, let's say, the name of the lightsaber, Anakin, Luke, Mace Windu? What if we set those names so that they were hyperlinks? Whenever we clicked on the hyperlink, what if it took us to a page where we could see more detailed information about that particular lightsaber? That would be relatively easy to do. The first column of my table, where I'm displaying the lightsaber name, I'm going to say link to, and then I'm going to give it that name as its first argument. So the name of the lightsaber will show up as the actual link text. The second thing I need to tell it then is the URL to link to. What is going to be the URL to show an individual lightsaber? Well, we'll talk more about it later, most definitely, but for the moment, would you believe me if I told you you don't even need to know? As a second argument here, instead of us actually typing in a URL, if we just tell Rails, I want to go to this lightsaber, I just give it the activerecord object, Rails will automatically figure out what the URL for it should be. Okay? So I told you when we've got a little more advanced with linkto, it would become easier than using a regular handwritten hyperlink. Well, here you go. We don't even have to know where we're linking to. I can just say link to this lightsaber. If I refresh my page, you see Anakin, Luke, and Mace Windu have all turned into hyperlinks. And if I go and inspect those hyperlinks, I can see where they're actually going. The Anakin link, for example, is going to /lightsabers/1. The Luke lightsaber is going to /lightsabers/2. And the Mace Windu lightsaber is going to /lightsabers/3. I'd be willing to bet, it's about the only case I would bet because I'm certain, right, that if we went out and looked in the database, what we would find is that the ID for the Anakin record in the lightsabers table is 1. The ID for the Luke lightsaber is 2. The ID for the Mace Windu lightsaber is 3. So what it's actually doing is it's putting together a pre-built URL for us that includes the ID of the particular lightsaber we click on. That way, when we actually click on it, whatever page we go to will know which lightsaber it is that it's supposed to show us. So let's try it. If I click on Anakin, up here in the address bar, I can see I've gone to /lightsabers/1, and it's telling me it's missing a page called show. So like before we were missing a page called index, now we're missing a page called show. So I think that's the next thing we need to create. Do you have any questions before we do? Under the lightsabers views folders then, I need to make a new page there. I'm going to call it show.html.erb. I'll just put that in as a comment up here at the top to help us remember which page we're looking at. A little bit bigger than my tiny little titles up there. Let me put in an H1 up at the top, and I'll say showing lightsaber. Over in my browser, if I hit refresh, no more error message about not being able to find a show page. It does find the show page now, and it says showing lightsaber. If I go back and I click on Luke, I get to that page. If I click on Anakin, I get to that page. Same thing if I click on Mace. Now I don't really want all of these pages to say showing lightsaber. I'd rather it do something useful like tell me the name of whose lightsaber that is. So how do we get the data? Well, general rule of thumb is that the views never should get the data themselves. the controller gets the data and then supplies that data to the view. So if we want there to be data available here about a lightsaber in the show page, we should go look at the controller. If I go to the lightsabers controller, find the show method, well, golly gosh, look what it's already doing. It's already finding a lightsaber with an ID that was given. It's taking that lightsaber and putting it into an instance variable called @lightsaber, which should mean that in my show page, I'll have access to this variable @lightsaber, which should contain the proper lightsaber for showing. So let me give it a try. Inside the H1 on my show page, instead of saying showing lightsaber, I'm going to put in some output tags. And instead I'm going to put in @lightsaber.name. Give me the name of the lightsaber. Aha! Anakin shows up. If I click the back button, go back to my main lightsaber page, my index page, and I click on Luke, Luke shows up. Eureka! It's working. I should then be able to basically just fill in all the rest of the data that I want to show here on this page. All the data is available there in that @lightsaber variable. So let's see, I could put in some paragraph tags. In the paragraph tags, I could say @lightsaber.description. Maybe back up here in the header, in parentheses next to the person's name, maybe I'll put in the color of the lightsaber, @lightsaber.color. If I take a look, that's how it looks now. Anakin's lightsaber, the blue one. The description, lightsaber used by Anakin in Episode 3. For dark side, instead of just displaying the true or the false, maybe I'll use that value and do something with it. Maybe I'll say if lightsaber.darkside. So if this was a dark side lightsaber, then maybe I'll put an extra paragraph in here. Maybe I'll put it in emphasis. This is a dark side lightsaber. So for Anakin's, that message shows up. For Luke's, it does not. Last thing maybe is I want to put in the image of the lightsaber. I can use the image tag helper again. @lightsaber.image. I'm not going to make it smaller this time. This details page is the perfect place to have the image nice and big. So I could just have it in there like that. The image tag helper. Not too bad. The one problem, of course, with the image tag there is we already know that all of our lightsabers don't have them. Having an image is not required. So, for example, if I go to Mace Windu's page, if I click on Mace Windu from my index page, I get a broken image tag. So again, with the image tag, maybe I want to check for that. This time maybe I'll say do an image tag unless @lightsaber image is blank. Now no image shows up for Mace. If I go to Anakin, it shows up. If I go to Luke, it shows up. Not bad, huh? So we've gotten a little bit of infrastructure here built. We've got a page that lets us see a summary of all of our lightsabers. We've got detail page now that lets us see the detail of a particular lightsaber. What we can start working on Wednesday then is some of the forms that need to go along with this. We would need to, for example, to create a form that would let us create a new lightsaber. We would need a form that would let us edit lightsabers. So there's going to be a lot of work with hyperlinks so that we can get back and forth to and from these different pages. And there's going to be a lot of new helper methods, primarily those that have to do with creating forms. Is it kind of fun? Do you want to just go back to the console and talk about active record some more? Usually views are a little more interesting than that. All right. Were there any questions I could answer before we quit for today? All right. I hope you all have a good afternoon.
What's on the far end? Is there an index blank?
There's just the close of the ERB tag. That's all. All right. Have a good afternoon. I'll see you the day after tomorrow.